More than $1 trillion of wealth is going to be lost by the American people over the next 5 years.
People that get addicted to their products, then they have information about that individual, where they live, personal information.
Not only do we not research this, we don't invest any money into preventing it or treating it.
Responsible gambling is a sham.
This video is brought to you by our generous sponsors, Right Choice Recovery and the Campaign for Fairer Gambling. Check the description of this video for more information about Right Choice's services and for the campaign's mission statement. Over the next 5 years, Americans are set to lose over $1 trillion to gambling. Every minute, Americans lose $300,000. So in this video, there's gonna be a counter in the top left corner, and it's gonna track how much money Americans have lost just while you're watching this video. But how did we let this happen? Well, the states were promised major tax revenues from legalizing sports betting, and that's actually been true. In 2024, states made $15.91 billion in gambling tax revenue. And the bulk of that money came from casinos lobbying to get online sports betting legalized. But what casinos conveniently forgot to mention to lawmakers when they pitched this was the estimated $14 billion of social costs incurred by Americans every year as a direct result of gambling addiction. This comes from things like bankruptcies, divorces, social welfare costs, and things like incarcerations. So to better understand what was going on, we spoke with someone who's essentially the casino's biggest hater, Les Burnell, director of Stop Predatory Gambling.
Stop Predatory Gambling's mission is to tell the truth behind commercialized gambling operators, to prevent more victims, and to advocate policy reforms to take gambling out of the public square and back onto the side of the people. Predatory gambling is America's most neglected major problem. You're paying higher social costs, you're paying higher taxes for this. More than $1 trillion of wealth is going to be lost by the American people over the next 5 years. Larger that portion of that money is coming from citizens who are addicted, but you, the non-gambler, you're having a lower standard of living because of that.
We'll be hearing more from Les later on in this episode, but I also want to introduce you to Brianne Dora Shawwal.
$14 billion annually is the latest estimate in cost, but in the state of New Jersey, it is $350 million per year from iGambling alone.
If this is a fact that exists out there, how does it factor into conversations about policy when the industry is seeking to legalize new forms of gambling in different states? Shouldn't we have learned our lesson?
Yes, we should have. But gambling policy exists in a silo. See, this is one of the biggest frustrations about our federal government currently not acknowledging or investing in this public health issue. Because gambling policies are determined on a state-by-state basis, it also is leaving the problem gambling policies to be determined in isolation. It is very rare that you will have someone from the problem gambling field be able to testify, well, this is what we're experiencing in New Jersey. You should consider it here.
So then this false promise essentially led to the policies that we have today being passed, but what do they look like practically? Well, in 2018, the Supreme Court ruled that it was up to states whether or not they wanted to partner with gambling operators to legalize sports betting in their jurisdiction. And as a result, 38 states and Washington, D.C. have since legalized online sports betting. We wanted to see who even makes these decisions, what the gambling industry is saying to get these laws pushed through, and who's responsible for regulating it once the laws pass.
Compared to other public health initiatives, the federal government is completely silent and absent from the discussion. Not only do we not research this, we don't invest any money into preventing it or treating it. And that really puts the states in a precarious position because they are left to their own accord. So unless someone is insisting and bringing to light some of the data from other jurisdictions about what happens when you neglect this issue, sometimes we find ourselves passing gambling policies in complete isolation from the problem gambling debate that should be happening, not just alongside or adjacent, but literally inextricably linked to every decision that they make.
Isn't that play into the hand of the gambling industry to keep growing, essentially? Because if they fail in one place, they can just go to the next?
Yes. I think that policymakers by and large want to do right by their people. They were elected because they were believed in, that they were going to do good to represent the interests of their districts. But the truth is that they're unintentionally enabling sometimes really dangerous policies And 9 out of 10 times, the industry is the one stakeholder base that is existent in every single market.
It feels like things are only getting worse and that nobody's really even doing anything about it. Is something being done? Well, there have been some attempts at stopping the seemingly unstoppable rise that these casinos are on. Congressman Paul Tonko has introduced a bill known as the Safe Bet Act. The bill's goal is to limit some of the negative implications of PAPSA being overturned in 2018 and requires states to meet federal standards on advertising, affordability checks, and the use of AI against the gambler. Here's some of what the bill does. So that your kid doesn't get exposed to something as addictive as gambling as soon as they get home from school, the bill seeks to prohibit sports betting advertising being broadcast between 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. local time. To prevent people from gambling money that they don't have, even though some casinos offer their own version of a credit card, this bill seeks to prohibit operators from accepting deposits via credit card. And we know the main way casinos get you hooked onto gambling is by giving you something like a free bet. So this bill seeks to prohibit sports betting advertisements designed to induce gambling with bonus bets or similar promotions. Casinos are even tracking players with AI, so they know exactly how to offer you the optimal promotions, even if you're broke. So this bill seeks to prohibit the use of AI that tracks players' individual gambling habits. I spoke to gambling policy activist Matt Zarb-Cousin to better understand how casinos are using AI against the player.
It's really important to understand how important it is for the commercial model of the gambling industry, particularly online, to have people that get addicted to their products. Then they have information about that individual, how, not just their gambling style, how they interact with the platform, and they don't just use that, it's also where they live, personal information that they haven't really approved the operator to process. All of this builds a big profile of that customer. The game is to extract as much as possible from that person. And then once they've done that and that person self-excludes, then they'll find someone else. Convert some of the 95% that aren't necessarily addicted to gambling into the 5% that drive all the revenue, or they'll find more people that just go and recruit new gamblers. And the most efficient way of recruiting new gamblers in terms of the commercial model of the sector is to target younger people, because those younger people are more likely to get addicted. The brain hasn't fully developed till you're 25.
And look, it wasn't enough just to read about the bill. I wanted to speak to the man who wrote it. So I went to the Capitol to speak to Congressman Paul Tonko so we could discuss why he wanted to bring this bill to life.
My attention to this whole issue was driven primarily by younger folks who were showing me how much advertising was part of the social media out there, how there was this proliferation of advertising and luring in of the individual. And it's no wonder that when we look at things today, you know, it's always been the American thing to watch sporting events. I think the sports books have taken that away from families. We just want to bring it back to be the favorite pastime with families, and that it's got that innocence again. You know, they took a love for sports, a thirst for sports, and they took all those concepts and they poured them into a booking opportunity so that you can wager a bet with a sports book. And now it's like, okay, you're this vulnerable target, you know, and we're going to just saturate you with advertising. We're going to hit your social media constantly. We're going to give you micro bets so you can keep chasing losses. And before you know it, a known addictive product has not been addressed well enough simply by turning a green light on from the U.S. Supreme Court decision and indicating to states you can go do this.
But the casino industry says they have this under control. I mean, don't worry, Congressman. Casinos say they want to see everyone gambling safely, but do they really want that? Let's talk about what they call responsible gambling.
Take a friend, set a limit. Anyone who can responsibly gamble is not a compulsive gambler. Anyone who is a compulsive gambler, unfortunately, cannot gamble. It is no different than someone who struggles with alcohol, who then eventually gets help. They can't have one beer. They can't have one drink. They can't just drink on New Year's, just like we can't make one bet.
Responsible gambling, in my view, is the collective, unified approach by all stakeholders to do everything in their power to mitigate and reduce the harms that inevitably will come for some from gambling.
I don't know either, to be honest. In my opinion, responsible gambling is an out for the industry.
Responsible gambling is a sham. It's a PR campaign, a public relations campaign to give the appearance to political leaders, to media, and to the 2/3 of the public who rarely gambles, to create this impression that somehow we're protecting the American public from this extremely predatory business.
This feels like what casinos are using to shield themselves from blame and shift that blame onto the addict. To be fair to the gambling industry, we wanted to give them a chance to clear this all up. I asked them if they'd like to comment on what responsible gambling is and how they'd like to promote it. They all declined to comment. So we found someone who works as a consultant for the industry from time to time to shed some light on their perspective. What is responsible gambling?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a three-part thing. I think for operators, it's to provide your products and services in a responsible manner. In other words, have the tools. Make sure you're not marketing irresponsibly. Make sure that you've got limit-setting tools. Making sure that you're doing not just what you're required, but hopefully more than what you're required to minimize harm among your users. When we look at the industry and we look at responsibility, it becomes more complex. So there's a lot of subjectivity there. I would say generally they are responsible within the limits of what they're required to do. What they're required to do, that's where the real challenge is. State lotteries who do run sports betting actually are specifically exempt from the Truth in Advertising Act. Casinos are regulated differently than, let's say, sports books in some states. Each state regulates differently. Each state has a different set of marketing restrictions. There's no national standard.
So basically, they tell people to gamble responsibly, knowing that gambling addicts won't, give them tools which they won't use, and allow them to self-exclude, which they won't do. It puts all the onus on the addict to make changes, and if you have a gambling problem, then hey loser, we'll give you some help. And there's really nobody telling them to do anything differently because so much money is at play.
It's no surprise that maybe they're not interested in really doing prevalence studies or really looking at, has there been an increase in gambling addiction since 2018, when since 2018, 40 states have legalized sports betting?
Are the state legislators adequately educated about gambling addiction?
God, no. No, they really don't want to know because they're holding the bag. In a lot of cases. Yeah, the private operators are profiting massively and they bear a responsibility. They've got a huge role to play too. But it's the folks that really set the rules and that are also making windfall profits. They are public servants.
Why aren't the groups that represent the gambling addicts saying anything? Well, guess what event this list of sponsors came from? Yeah, the National Council on Problem Gambling's most recent conference. The National Council on Problem Gambling and their state affiliates are mainly funded by gambling revenue. And a lot of the events that they put on may even take direct sponsorships from casinos.
So I think there's a lot of well-intentioned people who are in the rank and file of these state councils across the United States who like to sit around a table and try to come ideas around prevention and education, makes everyone feel like they're doing something. We're pushing gambling fentanyl into people's homes and normalizing it, by letting people watch it on television, like seeing their favorite athletes endorsing gambling fentanyl. The business model for these gambling operators is based upon addiction. It's based upon identifying people who could be addicts, cultivating these citizens who are being turned into addicts, and then once you're clearly identified as an addicted gambler, just to take you for all you're worth.
In fact, it reminds me of a story from the very first time I spoke about my gambling addiction in public. It was at a conference for the Delaware Council on Gambling Problems. A great conference, but I walked into the room and the #1 sponsor for the event was FanDuel. I thought I was on the wrong side of the hallway or something. Like maybe the gambling addicts are over here, the casinos are over there, but that was just who was sponsoring the event. So we wanted to find out how the leadership of these councils feels about the current way that it's structured. So we spoke to Dave Wall and Heather Martinez of the Illinois Council on Problem Gambling to find out.
My name is Heather Martinez and I'm the Associate Director for the Illinois Council on Problem Gambling.
Dave Wall, I'm the Executive Director of Illinois Council on Problem Gambling. We've learned that all of the affiliates they have different tasks, they have different missions. Our focus is training, so the way we reduce harm is to, the conference we had today, we provide training to counselors.
I think that one of the big challenges as an affiliate of the National Council on Problem Gambling is that you're technically gambling neutral. Would you be able to talk about what that means and how it relates to the mission that you have here?
Yeah, absolutely. So our mission, right, is to reduce the harm for those in the state with problem gambling. To me, the neutrality makes absolute sense. First off, we're up against a multi-billion, trillion-dollar industry, right? So even if we wanted to be anti, we're just a small player in that and we would never have success. But in reality, I just think the neutrality makes a lot of sense. Gambling itself is an entertainment source. There's 90+% of people that that, you know, they go, they gamble, they have a good time, and that's that. They go home and they're fine. There's less than 10% that do struggle with problem gambling. With that 10%, we're here to support them. So really, we just want to keep that balance. We want to make sure that as new gambling and opportunities to gamble come out, that there's that balance of those, you know, to support those that are struggling.
So what would be some of the challenges and maybe some of the opportunities while maintaining that neutrality? What does that open you up to?
There's a lot of gray areas sometimes, and so really trying to navigate that and, you know, not mixing emotions, right, in our own personal aspect in with that. But I would say that's probably one of the biggest challenges is, you know, we want to partner with those organizations, but then, you know, there's a concern of like the motives, right? We want to make sure that we're being motivated by the right things and that we're making the right decisions.
I think the people at these councils honestly have great intentions, and a lot of them do fantastic work. I've done work with them as well. But we do have to be honest here. There's some inherent limitations in their messaging. I mean, they rely on the gambling industry to exist. They hold a stance of neutrality towards gambling. It's not good, it's not bad. And sometimes when a message is too neutral, it fails to have any bite behind it. But that opens up another challenge if we're being honest. If these councils didn't accept funding from the gambling industry, then where would the funding come from? Would it come from a bill like the Safe Bet Act that would include funding for gambling addiction? If not, who will help the gamblers in America?
We've been going through different iterations of the bill based on professional responses that we get from the field. It's been very encouraging to see how many are out there that are taking a science-based, evidence-based approach. People in recovery who've advised us beautifully, where families have inspired us. They have told us to continue this fight because they're concerned about members in their family. You know, the beauty of this place is that if you see a cause that is just, and you know, what could be more just than preventing addiction? We're not doing this because it's easy or it's popular. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do, the just thing to do.
What I do know is that if we keep allowing the gambling industry to have a hand in the policy debate, we can't honestly expect any lasting or legitimate change to take place. I mean, they're a business after all. If the groups made to help gambling addicts have to remain gambling neutral, it creates a situation where we're helping those already struggling, but not effectively preventing damage to those that may struggle, because we weren't able to accurately discuss the risks without the funders getting upset. Next, we're gonna take a look at gambling addiction from the lens of public health. Is this the next epidemic that's gonna sweep our nation? Subscribe so that you don't miss the answer.
Thousands and thousands of people who work in the gambling industry, who shield their eyes every day from the harm that their business inflicts on the American public.
I honestly didn't believe anybody could help me because nobody would understand it.
Gambling addiction affects you as well, and it affects your wallet, even if you've never gambled before in your life.
I don't believe that there is an addiction to mobile betting any more than there is an addiction to utilization of your phone for any other reason.